Ready?
Today is March the 5th, 2024. My name is Lynn McLarty, and I have with me my longtime friend Rex Adams to once again videograph an interview with a prominent person in the history of Trinity United Methodist Church. Such is the interview today with leader Sam Rogers Sr. We are his guests in his apartment at Westminster Oaks here in Tallahassee. I cannot comfortably interview Sam without my first expressing deep sorrow that his wife, Mary Margaret, does not occupy a chair beside him today. I know this is difficult, Sam, knowing the first anniversary of her death will be March the 8th. Sam, please tell the congregation something about your early life, your birthday, your home life, your native community and school, and then continue chronologically with your college experience and your active duty military involvement in Korea. And I'm sure that from then on, the door will be open for what comes to your mind. We're here for you today.
Well, my roots are in southeast Georgia, near Claxton, on a tobacco farm where my father inherited land from his father to grow tobacco. In the first year, he couldn't pay the seed bill because of the depression that was coming on, and he looked for a better opportunity in this world, and he moved to Houston, Texas, where he got a job as a welder. And it was there that he met Wilhelmina Bird, my mother, who had a job as a secretary with the Reagan High School. Okay, and then in August 5th of 1932, I was born of that marriage in the Jefferson Davis Hospital in Houston, Texas. My father subsequently went to work for a life insurance company domiciled in Houston, and was moved to Beaumont, Texas, where I attended the first grade. And in the first grade, I was sick the whole year with every childhood disease under the sun, including the measles, the mumps, the chicken pox, and even the whooping cough. And they had to take me out of school the first grade. Therefore, I lay claim to the fact that I flunked first grade.
Did you have siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have a brother, James Giles, Buddy Rogers we called him, and a sister, Elsie, who lives here in Tallahassee, as a matter of fact, and she's a teacher at TCC.
Where do you stand in the birth order?
I was the oldest.
You were the oldest.
Born in 1932.
Okay.
And in 1941, the country was involved in, after Pearl Harbor got involved in World War II, and my father had a first cousin living in Panama City, Florida, who owned several businesses, was an entrepreneur, and he asked my father if he would come to Panama City and help him run those businesses. My father packed us up bag and baggage and moved us from Beaumont, Texas to Panama City, where we lived in a small apartment for several years because Panama City was a boom town with a Wainwright shipyard building Liberty ships, Tyndall Air Force Base, two Army bases up there, and there was no place to sleep at night, and I was 1942, I was a 10-year-old boy, and I fell in love with Panama City as a boy because it had a beach, it had all those bayous around there that I could fish in and run in it, and I just loved it. My sister, Elsie, was born that year in 1942 in December, which was my Christmas present that year. And she was named Elsie after my Aunt Elsie. And during the war, my father and my mother and father would go to work in the morning, and I would go to school, and in the afternoon my job was to take care of my sister until they closed up the business at night and got home about 9 o'clock at night. And so from there, when I was about 17 years old, I joined the National Guard in Panama City in order to get a little extra money for the, being a member of the National Guard and going to the drills and everything like that. And then in June of 1950, the Korean War broke out, and my father, who was an old Marine, came home to me one day and he said, "Son, that National Guard company is getting ready to be called up, and I don't want you to be a trigger puller in the Army, and I would recommend to you that we take you down to the post office and sign you up for the Navy." So on December the 28th, 1950, I would join the U.S. Navy and was sent to Birmingham, where I was sworn in and put on a troop train west to San Diego, where I went through 12 weeks of boot camp. And when I got out of boot camp, I was shipped to Korea, aboard an LST, which is an amphibious ship, to support Marines in combat duty over there. And we were there in 9 months in a combat situation. And then after that, I was shipped back home for 30 days leave and transferred to another amphibious ship and sent back to Korea. So I did 2 combat tours in Korea from 1951 until 1953, when the peace treaty was signed.
Tell us a little something about your contribution on the ship, what role you played.
Okay. I had 2 roles aboard a ship. All sailors have 2 roles. They have the role of managing the ship's operations, and then they have the role of when you're in battle, what you're stationed in battle. My role was that of supply clerk for the ship itself, and my job was to make sure that the ship had enough supplies and ammunition and that sort of thing to manage the ship. My combat duty was, number 1, I was assigned to a boat, to what they called an LCVP, a landing craft that was part of the ship. Because of my training in the Army, I had qualified with an M1 rifle, and my job was to get in this boat and go around. We were in the Yellow Sea off the west coast of Korea, and there was concern of those islands being invaded by Chinese. The North Chinese had gotten, the Communist Chinese had gotten into the war by then, and our job was to try to keep those Chinese off of those islands. And so what we would do is go around and they had these North Korean junks. They were boats, they called them, big boats that would transfer troops and equipment and ammunition. And our job was to inspect these Chinese boats and these they call them junks, and that was part of my job.
Were they bringing supplies into your ship from a mainland?
No, we were self-contained.
Self-contained.
We had enough supplies aboard our ship to last us for 2 months. And usually a tour of duty in the combat zone was 6 weeks. And then we would go back to Japan and refurbish the ship.
Okay, so Japan was your
Yeah.
fueling station, so to
Right.
speak.
Well,
Yeah.
what we would do is we would be 6 weeks on what they call on the line, on the combat line, and then we would go back to Japan while the ship was being refurbished and get what we called R&R, rest and relaxation, in a pleasant place. And just off the record, we used to call it I&I, intercourse and intoxication.
I haven't heard
Brett might need to edit that part out.
Yeah, leave that one out.
Sam,
And I was an 18-year-old full of myself back in those days too. I could drop break anybody.
so were you looking at the future then, is when this would be over, your next step in life?
That's a good question. Yes, as I indeed was. I was a enlisted man, and I lived in a bunk in a compartment aboard ship with a bunch of other sailors, and we had bunks that were stacked 6 high down in where you would sleep on stacked up, like double-decker beds. And I got to seeing that the difference between where I lived and the difference between where officers lived. Officers lived in quarters where each officer had his own bunk, own private room. Sometimes there were 2 of them to the room, and they had these stewards mates that served them their meals in what they call a wardroom. And it occurred to me, why am I living like this and they're living like that? And why is that? And the one thing that I came to the conclusion was the difference was they all had a college education and I didn't. And I determined at that point in time that I was going to get me a college education if I ever got out of the Navy.
Very good, Sam.
And I went, and I did. I got out of the Navy early. In fact, I had signed up for 4 years, and the commanding officer of my ship had taken a liking to me, and he wanted me to what we call re-enlist or ship over, and we called it in the Navy. and I said, Captain, I'm not going. I'm a civilian at heart, and I want to go to school at FSU. He said, well, I'll tell you what. If you can get me a letter from the registrar at Florida State University that you have been accepted, I'll get you out of the Navy early.
Wow.
I did not have a high school education because I quit school in my senior year and finished up my high school on what they called the GED while I was in the Navy. I sent off to the FSU, and sure enough, the registrar came back with a letter that I was conditionally accepted, but I had to take some courses, remedial courses, English 100, Math 100, to get me up to college level, and if I passed those courses, then I was in. And with that, the commanding officer got me out of the Navy in 3 years, 8 months, and 21 days.
3 years, 8 months, 21 days. Now, you took these remedial courses when you got back or through the Navy?
I took those at FSU my freshman year.
Okay, that was included in your...
That was included in the
your
condition of
admittance
being
and
I had to be accepted, I had to take those courses. The first year, I had my mustering out pay, which was back in those days like $500, plus I had 30 days leave accrued, and they had to pay me for that, and they had to pay me the transportation back and forth. So I had $600 or $700, and that was big money back in 1954.
Yeah.
And that got me into school at FSU for the first year, and I got $110 a month on the GI Bill. And I was living pretty good that first year. But in the summertime, I got a job working with a crew that was doing the surveys around the state of Florida for the new highway system, the interstate system that was being developed.
At Eisenhower.
And after my freshman year and that summertime job, I was offered a job with the state insurance commissioner's office, a part-time job, because the state insurance commissioner and my father were friendly, and my father asked him to get me a job, and he did. And he gave me a part-time job so that I could work 4 hours a day and go to school 4 hours a day. And I took a full load in 18 hours, semester hours in college, and I worked 4 hours a day, and it was tough, but I made it.
Was that consistent with others getting out of the military at that time, that they would be work study, so to speak?
I would think so, because the Korean War was over in there, and the need for military people had gone down. Yeah.
And then you were probably finding some residual World War II veterans or still in the process of going to college. I would think.
When I was admitted as a freshman at FSU, I joined the Lambda Chi Alpha social fraternity. I'm sorry. That fraternity was consisted of mostly veterans like myself. Some of them World War II veterans, some of them Korean War veterans, and many of those fraternity brothers of mine I got to know after I got out of college, because they went to work in different different towns around Florida. 2 or 3 of them ended up serving in the legislature. One was a dear friend of mine, and a guy by the name of John Ware from St. Petersburg became a state senator. And he and I knew each other well in college. And
He was a fraternity brother.
fraternity brothers. There were several other members like that.
Sam, I'm interested in knowing when you got off that ship on the West Coast, your mother had to have some exciting moments knowing that her son was coming home from Korean War. And she was still alive and all when you came back?
That's a good story in and of itself.
When you came back to your family.
Yeah, I got on a train, the Southern Pacific Railroad train from LA to Los Angeles to, back then the Southern Pacific didn't run all the way to Panama City. It ran to Crestview, Florida, and my parents had to drive to Crestview to meet me at the train. And when I got off the train, my father and mother were waiting on me, and I put my sea bag, and I had my uniform on still, and my dad said, my mother hugged me and we talked, and Dad said, "I'm gonna take your sea bag and get it in the car, son." And when I got to the car, tears were coming out of his eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen my father cry. He'd never showed any emotion, him having been an old jarhead and Marine himself, but that was the first and only time I ever saw him cry was when I came home from the service.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. So we're back at FSU.
FSU.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The first year in FSU, I had a ball. And I mean, but I studied. I was scared to death that without having had a high school education, that I would flunk out. I couldn't make it in that place. And so I attended every class, took copious notes, and I ended up with what they call the dean's list the first year I was in college.
Were your courses at the West so to speak, the West Campus, or were you?
The West Campus back in those days was where married GIs lived with their family that were going to school at FSU.
So the campus was the campus as it is today, as far as the location.
West Campus.
When you were there.
When I was there, West Campus was where TCC is today.
Yes.
In essence. And West Campus had the FSU gym, played basketball in the gym at West Campus. West Campus was the old Air Force base back in those days during World War II.
Yeah.
And there was all of these barracks in there, and the married GIs that were going to school at FSU could live in their families there while they went to school.
But everyone went to so to speak, the campus that we have.
The
now.
campus didn't have but 9,000 undergraduate students, and that was a third of what we've got today at FSU.
Yeah, please. So please continue with your getting in the workforce after you graduated, or you were on the dean's.
I had this part-time job with the insurance commissioner's office. That's where I became interested in the insurance business, because I learned the business from the perspective of the regulator of insurance companies and agents. And that's also where I met Mary Margaret. In the summer of between my freshman and sophomore years, I had that job at the insurance commissioner's office in the summer. And one day I was called up to the administrative assistant's office and told that I had been assigned the responsibility of proofreading this gigantic book that listed the names and addresses of every insurance agent and every insurance company licensed to do business in the state of Florida. And it was a job that required 2 people, one to read and one to follow. You know what proofreading is.
Auditing.
And I was assigned to this little red-headed girl named Mary Margaret Andrews, who at that time had just graduated from high school. She was 17 years of age, And we would sit up in one of those committee rooms in the state capitol building because the legislature wasn't in session at 8 o'clock in the morning and start reading that thing together. We'd break and go go across the street to Holland's restaurant for coffee at lunch. And then she'd go home and I'd have brought me a sandwich to look, and we'd start back again in the afternoon until 5. And this went on for about 4 weeks. And by the time 4 weeks was up, I was in love. She was redheaded, not red, really auburn color hair, blue eyes that would look straight through you, freckles, and she had a sense of humor. She had a way of giggling when she talked. And but the difference in age at that time, I was 22 years old and she was 17. That's 5 years. Mm-hmm. And at age 17, for her and me, there's a wide difference at that age. But I knew in my heart that she had a crush on me, and I was flattered by that. And when we got through in the summertime and she went to school, she started school as a freshman at FSU, and I went back to school as a sophomore. In the space between the time we quit work and started school, I missed her. And I picked up the phone one day and called her at her house. And that was back in the days when the phone, if you only had 3 numbers for your telephone, and I had memorized that. And I asked her for a date, and she accepted. And we went to a movie in what was the old Florida Theater back then, and saw them. I remember the movie to this day. The name of the movie was Bad Day at Black Rock, with Spencer Tracy. It was a Western, and he was a gun-toting Westerner who came in town to straighten up the lawlessness in the town. I remember to this day. And I might say that it was a good day for me in Tallahassee, because I had met the love of my life. And that's how our love.
So you had no trouble knocking on the door with her parents with 5 years difference?
No, I don't even remember that. She was at school when she was in college.
So the parents didn't.
But we didn't. When we really got serious, you know what getting a fraternity pin means?
Yes,
getting pinned.
You get pinned. Yeah.
I pinned her with my fraternity pin.
Uh-huh.
And we met, and she was a Chi Omega. And the whole fraternity, our fraternity, the Lambda Chi fraternity, won 2nd place in the campus sing. We had some great singers in our group. We had a choral group in our fraternity. And the whole fraternity met in front of the fraternity house and serenaded the sisters of the fraternity while I pinned her.
Of the fraternity rather than the sorority?
Of the the whole fraternity marched down to the Chi Omega house,
right,
and serenaded the girls down there,
yeah,
as I pinned her. That was, and when I look back on that, that was a very precious day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then about a year later, we decided we wanted to get married. And
so this is year what? This is 50 what?
I was there in 54, 55. This was we were married in 58, so this would have been about late 56 or so, 1956. We were married in June of 58. And Mr. and Mrs. Andrews lived out on Georgia Street downtown in a nice little home. He was the state director of vocational rehabilitation, and Miss Andrews was a teacher at Sealy Elementary School. And she was a Methodist, belonged to Trinity, and he was a Baptist, belonged to First Baptist. And they stayed with their religious preference, because the churches were only about a block apart, yeah. And they would swap Sundays. They'd go one Sunday to the Baptist church and one Sunday to the Methodist church, and this went on their entire life.
And Mary Margaret tagged along to those. She
belonged to the Methodist church. Okay. She was born in the Methodist church, baptized in Trinity, and married in Trinity. And he was okay with that. That didn't bother him at all. They were good people. They were teetotalers. They did not allow drinking in their house, but they didn't criticize others for their drinking, for the fact. But they didn't drink. He was a World War I veteran who was an old boy born in Lenore, North Carolina, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And he, after World War I, he went back he understood the value of a college education, but he didn't have a GI Bill, but he went to school, got himself in school at the University of North Carolina, and he would work summertime in a tire factory in Dayton, Ohio, to earn enough money to go to college in the fall.
He'd go from Ohio back to North Carolina.
Yeah, he had a good job up there in the summertime, made him enough money to get him through school 1 year each year. He went. It took him until he was age 27 to get his college degree, and he did. And then he became the director of vocational rehabilitation in North Carolina, and Florida hired him away from North Carolina to be the first director of state vocational rehabilitation in Florida.
Does that mean Mary Margaret was born in North Carolina?
She was born in Tallahassee.
In Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that a little bit.
The whole Mr. and Mrs. Andrews moved from Carolina to Florida to take that job in 1929.
Okay.
And she was born in 1937.
Okay.
She had an older sister, Ara. She was the younger of the two girls. They only had two children. Where are we now?
So I'm at Trinity, and you and Mary Margaret decided to get married.
Yeah.
And I want to get into the marriage, and you tell us about being in the old church. But
Okay.
tell me your recollection of what Glenn James was doing during that time in the church, or were you attached enough to appreciate who he
can't-
was?
Glenn, my recollection of Trinity is the only pastor that was ever there was Glenn James when I first joined the church. Another thing of interest was that when we decided we wanted to get married, by Southern tradition, I had to go and sit down and talk with the Andrews and ask them for their permission, and I did that. And when I asked for permission, Mary Margaret was there sitting in the room, and they started this conversation, like I wasn't even in the room. And it was like, well, his name was Claude and hers was Hannah Royal, and they talked with each other for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then he looked up at me and he said, Sam, we like you, and we think you and Mary Margaret would make a good fit. But he said, she hadn't finished college yet. She was a year and a half, 2 years behind me. He said, it is a non-starter if she can't finish college. And I said, Mr. Andrews, I'll give you my commitment that she will finish college. And then he said, well, when do you want to have the marriage? And we said next June, and this was like in December. And he said, and then Ms. Andrews chimed in, she said, that soon?
You sound like my mother-in-law when I approached for marriage.
Well, you know, I was on the spot here. But anyhow, they agreed with that, and we got married on June 21st, 1958. And she wasn't 21 back in those days. He had to sign permission for her to get married. And on the day we went to the Clark County, to the Paul Hartsfield's office to sign the marriage certificates, he looked at me and he said, Sam, what was your commitment to me about college? I said, Sir, Mr. Andrews, she will finish college. And so he signed it.
He made you repeat that.
He made me repeat it before he signed it.
Very good.
And
We got to stop just for a second.
His making you commit yourself again before he signed his name on the release at the clerk's office.
And he signed it based on my promise. 1 year later, Mary Margaret walked across the stage at Westcott Auditorium to receive her diploma, pregnant with Sam Jr.
1 year.
1 year later, she was pregnant with Sam Jr.
Awesome.
But she had gotten her degree.
She got her, not only that, but she ended up getting a master's degree in education too.
After that, or was that all
After
within that year?
I get to that story.
Okay.
Well, you wanna start on the part Trinity now?
Yeah, you Trinity and then mesh it into your family.
Okay.
If you
We were married on June the 21st, 1958, in the old building that had been there since 1894.
1893.
60-odd years. Trinity's church then was facing the other way. The pulpit was on the side facing Park Avenue, and the people, the audience in the sanctuary faced Park Avenue, and they had a divide. They had these dividers in the middle of the church that would divide, that would come shut. What do you call them? Folding doors and things that would partition the sanctuary off so that Sunday school classes could be held in those, and then they'd open it up and Glenn James was the pastor then. When we wanted to get married, Glenn James was also the pastor when we were engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And the day we met with him to talk with him, to have our meeting with we always had to have with the pastor back in those days, he asked me the question. He asked me if I was baptized, and I said, yes, sir, I was. And he said, where? And I said, in Dothan, Alabama, because my family lived there. When I was 14 years old, I played football at Dothan High School, and I was on the football team, and the coach of the football team marched all of the players into the First Baptist Church in Dothan and had us baptized. And he laughed, and he said, I'll accept your word on that, Sam, because if I wrote to Dothan, the Baptists are not good about responding anyway.
That was Glenn.
That was Glenn James.
Yeah. And then during that time, I'd like for you to recollect any of those, what was going on in the church to see the need for a new sanctuary. And I know that was promulgated by
the age of the church.
Yeah, the age, but
well, I don't remember the details of it, but I know that the leaders in the church back then were Godfrey Smith, Frank Moore, Payne Majette, Mark Hill's husband, Lewis, and two or three others whose names escape me at the moment. But those were the leaders in the church back then. And Payne Majette was the chairman of the building campaign back then, as I recall.
He's right.
And Payne Majette Sr. had tried to hire me to go to work for Majette Moore, and Bob Atkins and I had already started our business, and so we were friendly competitors.
In the insurance business.
In the insurance business. Yeah. And Payne Majette
and Frank were partners.
Frank were partners.
Yes.
It was Majette Moore Insurance. Mm-hmm. And Frank and Payne was the insurance man, Frank was the money man. And they did a beautiful job. They had a fundraiser. When they were tearing down the old church, we moved into the State Theater to hold services on Sunday. And this went on for about a year until the new church got ready. As I recall, the Trinity Church we live in today was finished in 1963.
They had the dedication service May of '64.
Oh, 64, okay.
May of '64 was the first service in the new sanctuary. But in the meantime, Glenn James had passed away.
Yeah.
And he did not get to see the fruit.
I didn't know that. I didn't recall that.
He died, and then Aubrey Morris came in and just substituted from February to that summer when they got, I can't think of the minister's name then that came in and took over, but it was not Glenn James who
he was a big tall guy.
He was a big tall guy.
I can't remember his name either.
Was it Ware?
Who?
Ware,
yeah.
Yeah,
Melton Ware. Melton Ware, he was.
Yes.
And he was sent down there, as I recall, to keep the new church going because of the money that was involved. I think that that the Trinity borrowed money from Capital City Bank to finance a part of that building, because it was a big thing, it was a big deal.
Over $1
And
million.
you know, the window, you know, the window, the stained glass window in the church, that thing's worth over $1 million today, right by
For
itself.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Huh?
3 families did those 3 windows up
Yeah,
there. The Moore family, the Smith family, and Payne Midget's
yeah,
family.
yeah, I didn't know
So
that.
Those 3 families lay claim
Yeah.
to those 3 windows up there.
Well, there's no doubt that those 3 or 4 families were the driving force
To get it done.
to get the job done. And, you know, Trinity, the Trinity Sanctuary today, 1963 to 2024, that's almost twice the time that the old church was there.
We're having our 60th anniversary in May
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah,
It'll be 60 years that we moved into that sanctuary.
Uh-huh.
We had the first
yeah,
service.
in 63.
In
Well,
64.
yeah, 64, yeah,
So
64,
60
yeah.
years
Yeah.
that the church has been available to the congregation. So get back into personally your family, and then coming up, having them come to Trinity through the years. Sam Jr. was born in
Sam Jr.
59, I guess.
Sam Jr. was born in 59. yeah,
59.
In July of 59, and he was baptized in Trinity. And and then along came Elizabeth, our middle daughter, our oldest daughter, our daughter, a middle child. She was baptized in Trinity, and our youngest daughter also, Ann, was baptized in Trinity. And they went to school. They went to college. Went to Sunday school there. And I remember distinctly, Mary Margaret and I lived in a little apartment when we first got married, a little 1-bedroom apartment with a kitchen. And then my business got to doing okay, and so we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. And business started doing a little bit better. And then Ann was born, and we moved into a little house, a little 3-bedroom house out in off the Appalachia Parkway in Richardson, on Richardson Road. And we had 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. We couldn't afford the second bath. Welton Smith built the house for us. And I lost my train of thought.
So your family's growing, and,
My family's
and
growing.
you are now in a 3-bedroom
A
house.
3-bedroom house
On Richardson.
on Richardson Road.
And the children, y'all are coming to Trinity as
Oh,
a family.
I want not.
Okay.
We didn't have much money, but we had a lot of energy and a lot of high hopes and great expectations. Mary Margaret inherited from her mother a Singer sewing machine that was then an antique, and she would make clothes for our kids to go to Sunday school in. And most of the clothes that our girls particularly made were little dresses made by Mary Margaret, and she would take them every Sunday to Sunday school. And then after Sunday school and after church, we would always go to the Andrews house and have lunch.
They were still on Georgia Street?
No, they were on Brookwood.
Brookwood.
Yeah, the Andrews did.
Yeah.
The Andrews moved into a new home in the interim there, moved into the bigger home on Brookwood Drive so they could be near the hospital, and that's where they went to, where they lived there.
So the children, your children went to where to elementary school?
Sam Jr. went to Kate Sullivan.
Uh-huh.
Elizabeth went to Kate Sullivan, and then we left the insurance agency business because politics had entered into the insurance industry from the following legislature, because insurance companies were raising automobile insurance rates, and the people in Miami were raising hell about the cost of their insurance down there. And the legislature was forced into the battle has put a hold on insurance rate increases and the result of that was that insurance companies quit writing automobile insurance in Florida. And Bob Atkins, my partner, and I were writing a lot of automobile insurance. And we couldn't write any new business. We could only write the business that was already on the books.
You renew it.
And renew it,
Renew
yeah,
it,
yeah, and we could write homeowners and other lines, but we were confronted with either going in bankrupt or whatever, and Bob and I made a decision that I would go back to the insurance commissioner's office and try to get my job back, and he would run the business with an understanding that when I got ready, when conditions improved, I could come back to the business.
Where was your office when you were together?
Okay. Our first office when we were together in 1959 was in a little office right behind the First Presbyterian Church right next door to Trinity. And right behind the church was there was a little building that Howard Wadsworth had his New York Life Insurance Company office in. We rented an office to him, really a big closet, to start our business.
So it's on Adams, and it's between the Church of the and the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah, and it belonged to Howard Wadsworth.
And it's on the west side of Adams. It's the same side that the Presbyterian Church is on.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
And then our business started growing, and that was in '59. And we bought a lot over on what's the name of the street that's on the other side of Monroe going north and south?
Calhoun.
Calhoun. We bought an office. We bought a lot on Calhoun, next door to the Barrett, Daffin and Fig architect office. And Welton Smith built us a little shotgun office building in there. And
So your office was on Calhoun, but between what? Call and Park?
between Park and going north, it was Barrett, Daffin and Fig had their office building on Calhoun also.
Uh-huh.
And we were right next door to them in our little office, in a small office building we built there.
So the Centel building is across the street there now, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So will you please?
No, that's wrong. Centel is on Calhoun. The next street over is Jefferson, isn't it?
No, Jefferson, no.
Gadsden.
You're on the east, you're on the east side of Monroe? That's Calhoun.
The Calhoun, the Centel is on Calhoun. Its
Yes.
side is on Calhoun. What is the next street over, going north and south?
Park is going one way and Call is the other.
Call.
It's Call and Park.
We were on the next street over going north and south.
Okay.
And I can't remember the name of the street. I want to say Jefferson, but that doesn't sound right either. But anyhow, our office
Okay,
was
it was downtown.
Was downtown, yeah.
And the same guy that built your home on Richardson built your
that
office.
house for us,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Well, Sam, will you continue about your children growing up and your home life and Mary Margaret's being the mother of the children and I guess taking them to their respective
Well,
after school events?
shortly after I went back and got my job back with the insurance commissioner's office, I got a promotion with the insurance department to be head of their deputy insurance commissioner in charge of their rating division, which is where the hot spot where the politics were occurring. And my job was to oversee the rates that were being charged by insurance companies. And when they came in for a rate increase or a rate decrease or whatever, my job was to approve or disapprove those. And so that put me on the point in politics in the state of Florida. And I became, as a result of that, I became the lobbyist for the State Insurance Commissioner's office. By that time, Broward Williams was the State Treasurer and Insurance Commissioner. And I was one of his fair-haired boys, and he made me his lobbyist to represent the department before the legislature. And I got my experience as a lobbyist, testifying before different legislative committees.
Mm-hmm.
And it was long about that time that I met a guy by the name of Tom Johnson. Tom was the executive director of the Florida Association of Independent Insurance Agents. And Tom was impressed with my presence before those committees. And one day Tom walked in my office and he said, I have a proposition for you, Sam. And he said, I've already got this cleared up with Broward being the insurance commissioner, and he's for it. He said, I want to offer you a job with the insurance, with my office. He lived in Tampa. The office of what we called FAIA was in Tampa at that time. He said, I want you to be the director of education and the lobbyist. At that time, the legislature was only meeting 60 days every 2 years. Or they had begun meeting every year. They went from biennial to annual sessions around along about that time. and he laid a proposal on the table for me that doubled my salary that I was making with the department, gave me a car, gave me a membership in the Tampa Bay Yacht Club, and a bonus at Christmas time. And I took that thing home to Mary Margaret. We sat down with it, and she didn't like Tom Johnson because we'd been to a couple of conventions, and Tom was sort of a dirt road sport. And he'd had his snoot full of whiskey one night on the elevator and was talking loud, and Mary Margaret
Didn't like it.
didn't like that.
Didn't like it.
But we decided we'd go down to Tom's wife, Margaret Johnson, and Mary Margaret hit it off just like that. They loved each other.
Uh-huh.
And Tom could charm the birds out of the trees if he wanted to. And after that weekend with them, we accepted their job and we moved to Tampa. That was in 1969. And we lived in Tampa for a year, almost 2 years. And then Tom decided to move the whole operation from Tampa to Tallahassee. And today, on the back side of Killarn is the home office of the Florida Association of Insurance Agents. It's at the intersection between Shamrock and where it runs into
Centerville.
Centerville,
Yes.
and that's our office
Okay.
back there.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Sam Jr. was in like the 3rd grade in Tampa, and Elizabeth was in the 1st grade, and Annie was too young. And we lived in Tampa for about almost 2 years before we moved back to Tallahassee.
Sam, I wanted to, since we're doing this for the congregation at Trinity, I'd like to see if you have any more to say about your remembrances of people at people at Trinity that you reflect on as being instrumental in moving the church, or somebody there that stood out that you admired and thought that at the time you may have been so young that they were older than you and being in the guiding light to you.
I don't remember too much about the older people there, but I do remember that that some of our friends were in a Sunday school class that we met there. Lynn Walschlager
Yes.
and his wife Georgia were good friends of ours. We were in this Sunday school class. It was named after a member of Trinity who died. What was the name of the Sunday?
Pfeiffer?
Uh-huh.
Betty Pfeiffer? Betty Pfeiffer?
No, I knew Betty Pfeiffer.
You knew Betty.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I have, my memory going back then, I just don't have
Okay.
a lot of details on that.
So how about the transition into the new church? You hit on where we met during that time, but you remember the excitement that the congregation had at the time that we moved back in, and
Not in any specific detail. I remember going to church and how impressed we were with the new building and all of that.
well, you've been there 60 years in the new building. You've been there every week almost.
Almost every week, yeah.
So where does Trinity go from today with what you see now of what's taking place for our 200? So please leave us with
Trinity has been embarked on a bicentennial effort for more than 2 years now, trying to refurbish the church and raise enough money to get the church in good shape to last another right on well into the 21st century. And Susan Thomas and her husband John, I served on a committee with them, and we knew that we had things we had to do. Were put a new roof. We had you recall a Save the Steeple program that we had. We raised a couple of $100,000 to save the steeple, and didn't have to spend that much money. And that went over into the bicentennial fund, and we have raised about $1.2 million right now to finance all of the money that's needed to refurbish the kitchen and bring it into the 21st century. And all of the things that if you go to church on Sunday, you look at the floors, they've all been replaced. And it's right on throughout the church. So we're spending well over $1 million of contributions from members to refurbish the church and get it ready for the 21st century.
and our second 200th anniversary. I mean, in
Yeah.
years to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't be around for that one for
We
the
won't be.
third century.
But that's the only thing that we can do, and that follows the steps of those that came before us.
Yeah.
There were some smart people that bought property around Trinity that we use now for our facilities, the parking lot and the gravel parking lot down below, and where the playground is.
All of that belongs to Trinity.
All that belongs to Trinity, and some of our predecessors had enough unction and foresight in to say, we gotta do this.
But for them, Trinity would have been forced to move out of its spot.
For the spot, yeah. But then we have the preschool, and it comes and
Because
goes.
of the value of the property.
Oh, it's a half of a block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, and the whole parking lot for the Leroy Collins Library belongs to Trinity.
That whole side does.
We lease it to them for $1 a year,
Oh, is that what it is?
something like that, with an understanding that doesn't apply on Sundays, that we have the right to use that whole parking lot on Sunday, and then during the week, we have the right to the front end of it. And they don't pay any, people that use that parking lot don't pay any money to park there.
True.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you, Sam, for giving your time to Rex and me today to put this in the annals of Trinity's history, and we've been impressed with your stories, and I give you the opportunity if you have any last words for our congregation. We thank you again for letting us come in.
My pleasure.
And we thank you for what you've done. And just
If you-
just one Sunday at Trinity, we had the dedication of the pergola in the Sewell Garden, and your family, all of your family.
My whole family was there.
They were there, and it just shows how strong your family's been to Trinity through the years. And as a congregation member, I thank you to your family for doing that.
Trinity is, this is a personal story, and you can put this in there if you want to, I don't care. I was not raised in a church-going family. My mother belonged to the Christian church. My father was a Baptist, and neither one of them, when we lived in Texas, went to church regularly. And I was what you might call a nominal Christian. In other words, I was a Christian because that was what it was, but I was not a practicing Christian. When I met Mary Margaret, my whole life changed. And I understood that if we were going to have a life together, it was going to be centered around that church. And I joined Trinity because of that. And first I got involved in the church. I started out attending Sunday school, which I'd never done before. Next thing I knew that I was asked to speak in Sunday school, and I practiced studying, prepare myself to be a speaker, and then I was a Sunday school teacher for a while. And as time went on, Spencer Burris, you remember him?
I remember Spencer. He was the
Spencer.
treasurer of the church for a long time.
Spencer Burris. I used to sit near him and his wife in church, and one day he leaned over and he said, "Sam, I want you to be in church Monday morning." He said, "I need somebody to help me count the money." And I agreed. So for years I helped him count the money in church on Sunday, and I got to know who was giving what to whom around there.
So you'd come in on Monday morning?
I'd come in on Monday morning when Spencer and I would count the money from the collection plate and from whatever other source. And I did that for years. And then John Willis came along, and you know John well as I do. And John, in his own inimitable way, got me involved in the church. And he first got me involved with the Cuba mission.
Yes.
He called me up one day and he said, "Sam, Pat and I've got to go to Cuba." And he said, "Now I understand you speak Spanish." And I said, "John, I don't speak Spanish. I speak a little Spanish. I'm studying it." He said, "I don't care." He said, "I need somebody down there that can help me with Spanish." Because he was going to be there a week and he had to preach a sermon before their whole body down there. And I kept saying, "John, I can't do that, I can't do it." He said, "I'll take that as a yes." And so we got signed up to go to Cuba with him. We spent a week down there.
The two couples?
The two couples, Pat and John and Mary Margaret and me.
Uh-huh.
And I began to get more involved in the church because of him. And then when my grandson Brooks was killed, I was bitter. In the space of 1 year, my son-in-law Steve, Elizabeth's husband, had died in a diving accident. Brooks was killed, and Elizabeth's daughter Emily lost one eye in a freak accident. And I was mad with everybody, and I was mostly mad with God. And one day John took me out to Bradley's sausage place out north of town.
Bradley store.
Yeah, and he and I had a sausage dog, and he said, "Sam, he said, I want you to help me with something." He said, I want to get Trinity involved with this homeless situation. He said, there's a operation out north of town near the school board out there called Hope Community, where homeless families with small children are required to live temporarily until they get them in a permanent situation. And he said, "I want you to come out there with me and let's visit that place." So I went out there with him, and we visited out there, and the current executive director took us around, and those kids were living in squalor. It was a mess. They didn't have any place to play. The kids didn't. They were living out there. Most of them were black kids, some of them white, but it was.
Sam, get back into the Hope Community endeavor that you were encouraged to get into through John Willis.
Yeah, the executive director took us around to all of the facilities out there. It's where the Boy Scout camp used to be, next door to the Leon County School Board operation out there in West Pensacola. And they had 4 buildings out there, 3 buildings that were like a barracks, and then 1 building that was the dining room and the kitchen, the cafeteria. And 2 of those buildings were the families No, when one of those buildings was a family, and another building was for females only, and then the third building was for homeless men only. And when she took us around there, for example, the mattresses where the kids slept in the family area were full of bed bugs. The laundry room that they had an outlet hose thing would run out of there, and a family of rats had taken up in there. And I said to myself, how can we in the United States, the most prosperous nation in the world, permit this to exist? And I was taken. This was the time when I had just lost Brooks. And it came to me suddenly that I couldn't walk away from that. And so I got involved out there. And John and I made a presentation before the board at Trinity. And the Trinity board agreed to come up with whatever money was necessary to get that place in good condition, and to encourage members of the church to become involved in helping out there.
Do manual labor to help.
To do the manual labor. For the next 2 years, I spent 4 days a week, every week, working out there. And at one time I had as many as 15 or 20 volunteers who would come out there and sling paint in those areas. We refurbished every building. They moved the men out of there because they were having problems with sex abuse out there. They moved them over to the new Kearney Center, and we moved some of the families into that. And I got Sam Childers of Childers Construction to come out there and redo the whole inside out there, and he did it at his cost alone for me. We had volunteers, the likes of which Paula Smith, one of the judges here, I can't remember his name at the time.
Smith?
Yes, Bubba Smith.
Bubba Smith.
And Bill Gunner would come out there.
Yes.
And we had 10 or 12 people that showed up every week to paint, and this went on for 2 years, and we got that place looking halfway decent. We put in 2 new laundries, commercial grade laundries with washers and dryers. And one of our members, who subsequently was a builder, he subsequently moved away from here, but he built shiffer roads in each one of the rooms so they kids could have a place to put their gear at night. And it was a well done job, and one I took pleasure in.
Did any other churches contribute to it, or was it a project solely for Trinity?
Trinity, it was Trinity's project. I don't know about any others. And I know that in addition to all of that, once a month, every Tuesday night, volunteers from Trinity would show up and serve meals to those kids and their parents out there.
Wonderful.
And this went on for years.
Did it pass down after John left to?
I don't know. I know that it kind of died.
It died.
But after that, I was so involved with it that I got my Rotary Club involved out there. Rotary Club kicked in over $25,000 to redo the air conditioning in the dining room out there, because people were sleeping in there on cots at night, and the fire department came in and said, "You're out of code here," and they had to put in a new air conditioning unit, and Rotary kicked in to do that. And to this day, every once a month, every Tuesday night, every third Tuesday of the month, I have a group of volunteers who go out there and serve meals. To this day, we'll be doing it the 12th of this month.
That's next Tuesday.
Yes, next Tuesday.
Well, Sam, those are kind of things that we all need to
And
launch on to.
I'm not doing it. I'm
way.
doing it because I need to do it. It's more important to me to do that. I made a commitment to God after I had lost Brooks. I made a commitment to God that I would spend the rest of my life serving my neighbors, and I've done that. And same way with Cuba.
Your most recent trip,
The
yes.
most 2 weeks ago, Benson Green and Matthew and I went to Cuba and spent a week down there, or 4 days down there. And we took 3 suitcases full of medicines. We took like $5,000 between the 3 of us down there to help them with a building project they had in their church down there. And we continued, and Matthew personally made a commitment to help them in the future down there, because Cuba is a mess. Cuba is one of the most beautiful countries in the Caribbean. It has natural resources that you wouldn't believe. The soil is just beautiful for what you throw some seeds out on the ground, they grow. It's that good. And then they've got mining operations down there. With the tourists, they've got so much to offer, but that communist government down there keeps them pinned down. For example, the military, the Cuban military owns the radio, TV, and communications operations there. And the only people making money in Cuba is the Communist Party. Cuban people are not allowed to eat beef because the Communist Party takes that beef and sells it on the world market, and the proceeds of that come back to the Communist Party. Cubans are not allowed to fish in salt water, period. Cubans are not allowed to even go into a tourist hotel where they're tourists. You tell me what's right about that. They ought to take those people that are running that government down there and hang them.
They've been trying to do it for 60 years since we had pigs.
Yeah, it's politics.
Yeah.
Sam, again, thank you for letting us come into your home, and you shared with us your life and what it's done to Trinity.
I kind of stumbled around.
No, we've hit on some high points, and if you think of anything right now, please, we'll get on board and talk about a few more minutes if you come up with something.
Okay.
But thanks for what you do to humanity, to Tallahassee. Yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.